Thank you for downloading Atypical, the podcast. If you enjoy our work, all we ask is that you leave us a review in your podcast player and share it with your friends. It helps us reach more people, and it's always great to hear from you. Thank you again, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of Atypical, the podcast.
Hello and welcome to Atypical, the podcast where we look at life from a more atypical perspective. My name's Simon, your host, he, they, and it's lovely to have one of my returning co-hosts with me this evening.
Hello, I'm Marianne.
Hello, Marianne, how are you?
Yeah, okay, thanks. You?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. It's lovely to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you.
We've been doing some work together recently, haven't we? Looking at neurodiversity with a women's group. I was kind of hoping you could give us a couple of minutes of your thoughts on this.
I was approached by someone who is a autistic person, who's a woman as well, and she was saying that she wanted to be part of a sort of session, an awareness session, and she was willing to speak about it. She's volunteered to speak about her experiences as an autistic woman, and that we could organise something. And so I've been organising an event, and we got about 5 or 6 speakers so far.
Oh, wow, that's good.
People, yeah. So it wasn't just autism. There's all people that are neurodivergent in some way. So ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and dyspraxia. Those are the ones I think that we've got the volunteers from. All women on this one, because I think there's a lot of stuff around the disparity between male and female diagnosing rates because of the sort of male stereotypes with that. And so it was quite a good idea from this person to suggest it to me, because I know that there is a bit of difficulty sometimes getting a diagnosis if you're, even if you don't identify as a woman, if you're not the stereotypical cis male, then it can be quite difficult. Likewise with some ethnic diversity as well. So there's a lot of stereotyping around, particularly things like autism, where it's very much a more white boy. So sometimes people
of course. So
it's harder to get diagnosed as an adult. You get less support as an adult, and there's also some gender and racial disparity as well. So just trying to bring attention to the silly comments, things like women can't be autistic or whatever. You hear all sorts of silly comments. Just trying to bring attention to the fact that people can be female and women and be autistic. I'm really getting used to saying the word women and men, gentlemen and ladies and people, and because every time I keep trying to say female, because my brain is so technological, but apparently a lot of the women's groups don't like people saying terms like female and male.
I think certainly one of the things that we've always done on this podcast is whenever we use those terms, what we mean is any person who identifies as female or male, or indeed as non-binary. There are some of us who do that as well. All expressions of identity are valid and loved by us, because you can be your own unique person, and that's great.
So if I say the word female, it's not because I'm sort of deeply misogynist. It's But it was a very interesting take, I think, and I can't wait. I'm a bit nervous because I'm hosting the event, but it's going to be really great, I think, hearing from those perspectives, because we've had a few talks about, this is my experience, and it'd be nice to have a variety of people, which would be really nice, I think. Also wanted to do something on the ethnicity space as well, to see if we can get people from varied backgrounds. Although in the women's event, there is going to be people from different ethnic backgrounds, but in a specifically different ethnic background one, it would be more like any gender can partake sort of
Brilliant,
thing.
Yes.
It was a very good idea from someone. And so, I'm hosting that coming up.
Oh, marvellous. That sounds really, really rather good. Yes. I mean, one of the things that you just touched on, which I know we've talked about previously, both with yourself and with Kim and with Dahlia, is about whether or not it's one of the things that might make it more difficult for female identifying people to be diagnosed with autism is that women are better at masking it, better at camouflaging? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. Even if someone doesn't identify, I think there's a lot of stuff of when you're a young child, there's different expectations. So boys are slightly more encouraged to run around and shout, whereas little girls are maybe encouraged to get a toy ironing board and sit down and be quiet and that kind of stuff. And so that's all linked to the camouflaging those more obvious traits like, oh, that boy is running around and screaming. Something's not quite right there. Whereas the girl would have probably been taught, don't do that, or children should be seen, not heard, or be a lady, sit properly, have good posture, blah, blah, blah. So you get drilled in all those things more. A bit like how some boys, unfortunately, get told that they shouldn't, be sad or cry. Some girls should be told they shouldn't. I mean, some girls are told, unfortunately, that they shouldn't be, loud or weird or anything like that. And sometimes a lot of the interests that girls have, they might be more regular ones, like they might like dolls, but for example, a neurotypical girl might like dolls and have some favorite dolls, whereas maybe an autistic girl would know, the Barbie catalogue from 1950s to whatever, and be able to recite all the different types of Barbie or Baby Born or whatever. We are not sponsored. But yeah, or all the other ones that they had, like Charlotte, the, what was it? The one that can do cartwheels.
Oh, I don't know, I'm
Kathy,
afraid.
Yeah, they're Portuguese ones. The Kathy that does kissing.
The Kathy that does kissing. Oh my goodness.
So the little girl could give the doll a kiss on the cheek, and then the little doll would go, "Oh yeah, I love you," that kind of thing.
I've just Googled this. That is the stuff of nightmares. Oh my goodness. They look like they've got. Oh no!
Just the.
I have problems with puppets, and that's. Oh no!
Yeah, you should Google the Charlotte and the Cartwheel Charlotte. It's obviously a slightly different name, but I tried to translate it. So it's
Carlotta?
Yeah, Carlotta Cambilotta. I might have made a typo there, but yeah, so she basically does cartwheels. I never had any of these weird babies. I was also quite creeped out by them, to be fair. I played with trains, but that's because my father was not really into gender stereotypes. So I was lucky that I didn't really only get female, stereotypical toys.
Well, I feel like that's a good thing. And, we do love a good train, don't we?
Oh, God, yeah. Love a good train. Train sets and ones that are painted on pond and little fake trees. Love those.
So I went for a bit of a trip around Europe recently with our mutual friend and a whole bunch of others. And I'm fairly certain I was the only person on that trip who was not a train spotter.
Oh, but you do like them, though, don't you?
I know that I get on them and they take me from one station to another. I'm more of a station person, aren't I? I'm more sort of, infrastructure is kind of my thing. If I'm more interested in, industrial archaeology and like big industry and making the systems work. But it's like, does the train have seats and does it go from A to B and can I drink wine? It's basically all I require.
No.
So no, just going back to something you said about sort of the lack of support and about sort of that, nah, mate, you think you got autism? No, it's only for boys. How you said it's quite difficult for women to get a diagnosis, but I mean, I know that you do. Could you tell us a bit about that, maybe?
Well, yeah. So I guess ever since I was a child, I felt a bit different, like not in a special way, but like a bit disjointed.
Okay.
So basically all my school reports, they mention the consistent things like lack of confidence, lack of assertiveness, inability to ask for help, doesn't play with other children. So the only people I would ever associate with were people that they said had special needs. I didn't actually know what that meant when I was in primary school, but
yeah, I don't think I would have either. So
yeah, I had no idea. So basically, I was a lot more shy, more restrictive with foods, and so I only ate bread and butter most of the time. Mm-hmm. And when I say shy, I mean it physically. It felt like I couldn't speak to people, like in a social context. So my parents would be walking me back from school, and another child would walk past and say hello, and I would hide. I would clam up in the throat. So yeah, my brother, he was born as well. He got diagnosed. He was born when I was about 6. He got diagnosed when he was about 2 or something, which was really quick and easy for him.
Yeah.
Following this, there was a lot of talk about it in my family. So always negatively, though. Like, oh, why, that kind of attitude.
Do you think there was a cultural thing behind that, maybe, or?
It could be, but I'm not quite sure, because my father didn't really say anything. My father was English, but my mother was not English, so maybe there's a cultural thing.
Okay.
So I know the UK is, I'm not being biased because I'm also heritage in other places, but UK is further ahead with that kind of invisible disabilities and autism and neurodiversity. They're quite far ahead, and especially with things like the way people speak about it as well. So certain words are not really used, whereas some other countries are still using words which we find a bit offensive. So I think we're quite far ahead, which is quite nice. I mean, I'm lucky to have been born here, I think, compared to some other places. But yeah, so my brother was basically a lost cause. So my mother at least gave up on discipline him because he was just deemed the problem child and too difficult. I did get psychologists that saw him, or people that saw him in a professional setting, suggest to my parents strongly that I should be assessed because they detected something in me as well.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so they detected ever since I was a child or a teenager or something. I got heavily bullied when I was a teenager. Bullies just sniff you out for being slightly different, and they do not.
I know, children can be so cruel, can't they?
I know, they're awful. A lot of physical stuff as well, like kicking and punching and really strong stuff. So even my grandmother, she detected I was a little bit unusual because some of my behaviours. So I did a lot of hand slapping, that kind of stereotypical thing. She took me to various psychologists. That wasn't in the UK though, so I don't actually know what came of this because she died. I don't remember whether they diagnosed me with anything or not, but my parents just told her to stay out of it. So
yes,
she knew that there was something up. My father thought that I was basically normal because he also had traits, basically.
Well, it's genetic, so it's possible him.
My mother didn't want 2 autistic children, so as I got older, things like bullying and struggling to maintain friendships. I had no friends for various periods. Things like exams made me overwhelmed. I also struggled with an eating disorder, so for a long time, since I was about 12 till about 20, but I still have the thoughts all the time. So I don't actively starve myself, but I still have all those negative thoughts. So I have a lot of mental health things as well, like anxiety and depression, which I think can be caused
is incredibly common in people with, especially with undiagnosed autism. But even once you've got it, because the world's not built for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. The world is loud and aggressive, and so when I started working, I had the same problems. I couldn't really relate to people the way I wanted to. So I could empathize with them, but it wouldn't translate or they wouldn't pick it up or something. And so it was like I was in a glass cage and no one could hear me. And so maybe the eating disorder was a way of controlling some aspects of my life, like the number on the scale or whatever, things like that, or the inches around my waist or anything like that, which I still find triggering. I can't really think about those things without feeling a bit weird. And so I was prescribed antidepressants and they were absolutely horrible for me. So they work for some people, which is great, but they gave me seizures, insomnia, memory loss, more weight loss, and it was really quite scary. I couldn't keep food down or anything physically.
Oh dear, yeah.
It was just, my body just clearly wasn't going along well with them. Smallest dose as well, so...
A lot of people really struggle with them just because of the way they work, and it might be something we cover briefly in an episode at some point. I've got a couple of friends who are a bit more sciencey about these things and actually explain how they work in the body. But a lot of people find that kind of reaction, unfortunately. So.
Serotonin reuptake inhibitor was what I was taking. So I always remember my father in the hospital during my first seizure. I never have seizures normally. It was just only this medicine did that. Never had them before, never had them since. So he told off a lady who slapped me on the head while I was in the waiting room.
Oh, Christ.
Because, basically she was saying, how could you say that you got problems? You're only 20. Have a smack. So, the GP referred me to the mental health team.
Laugh. That is just insane.
I know. It's horrible. The GP and the NHS mental health team didn't understand. They didn't listen. They probably thought I was hysterical. So they didn't believe me that it was the pills that were causing seizures and memory loss and all that stuff. And so at that time, I received a false diagnosis, which I say it's false because I've had second opinions which have negated it. Borderline personality disorder, which was later dismissed by several other professionals as something that just doesn't match my symptoms, because I know that a lot of girls actually, because I don't know how anecdotal this is, but a lot of girls get misdiagnosed, but girls as in young age, but a lot of people, if they're not male, they get misdiagnosed as BPD. Really? I don't know why. Yeah, I've heard of a lot of people having that. And so maybe it comes across.
Who've got it, and it's normally something that gets missed out and they get told they have other things instead. So it's quite interesting that your experience was the other way around.
Yeah, this borderline personality disorder that a lot of people got misdiagnosed with, I think, especially, all women, that kind of thing. Because sometimes I think when they look at someone who's not a male or someone who's a female, woman, girl, they think, they don't really think of autism first. They think, hysteria or something personality-based.
Well, I mean, hysteria is very much a patriarchal term for
exactly.
I feel women who are having complex issues, and it's one we should really consign to the history books, isn't it? Cause,
exactly, yeah. But I felt like I was definitely treated like that. I was dismissed and looked down on, even laughed at. The psychiatrist actually laughed at me.
I mean, that's really not good at all, is it? No, it's not.
No. So after all those family members, father, grandmother, grandfather, after they all died, within a space of 2 years, I decided to finally get an assessment, because it's only been my whole life people were talking about it. Has she, hasn't she, has she, hasn't she? And I felt so disjointed, and so I found it so difficult just doing stuff that other people could do so easily. Walking through a crowded corridor, making friends, being in friend groups, all of those things I've never really had. And so I decided to finally go to see my GP, get an assessment. Naturally, my first step, of course, was the GP. It was very kind and understanding. Very nice GP she was. One of those places where you always see a different doctor, but this particular lady was quite nice. And so she referred me to a person at the community adult mental health thingy, the NHS mental health people. Psychiatrist it was, and this was the most horrible, embarrassing, distressing medical experience I've ever had.
So I'm so pleased that you're telling me this, because mine's coming up again, so,
Oh, yeah. So she had no knowledge at all on autism. I think she reeled off a lot of, actual non-truths. So I've got a few examples of things that she said.
Go on.
Autistic people don't get eating disorders. And I've, basically, I did a bit of research, and actually autistic people are more likely than non-autistic to get eating disorders, because there's a thing about the regiments and the routine and the numbers and the control, and that is actually something that can happen. A lot of anorexic people can be autistic. Not all diagnosed, of course, but another thing she said was autistic people don't make friends, which is also very silly. I mean, we definitely can. It might be a bit harder and maybe fewer friends, but it is possible. Another thing was autistic people don't usually leave their house. So if you're here, you can't be autistic, basically. You managed to get here. So bearing in mind, this was a 10-minute walk, right? So it wasn't like a 3-hour-long commute or anything. So when I was, showing her my school reports, things that my mother had said about me, like she doesn't eat any foods of different flavors. She only eats bread and butter, blah, 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 blah. She's really quiet, doesn't speak to other children. All those things I was showing them in notes from my mother and notes from school. So basically when I was in primary school. So that shows that it's not like it's not like a recent personality thing you acquire as an adult or any result of trauma or anything. It's like actually part of the way your brain was made. She would just respond things like, this isn't in your notes, so I don't believe you. And she made me do impressions of trains, because I said that I could sometimes tell which kind of train it was by the sound. And so she said, yeah, go on then, let's hear them. And I did them, and she she didn't look too impressed, or she thought I was basically putting it on or something.
So you were sat there doing your very best Thomas the Tank Engine impressions.
Oh, my Jubilee line, doors closing. The battery, that thing. And
oh, goodness me.
I know. So she looked at me really smug, and she said, even if I was going to give you a label, which I'm not, and the fact that a medical professional used the word label automatically is a bit weird, because a label is something you have on a piece of clothing, or a label is something you have on a food item. So it's...
we've talked about labels before, haven't we?
It's ridiculous, isn't it? So
yeah.
She also really worryingly said, we do get a lot of people asking for autism assessments, and it's trendy. They're probably all seeking attention or something. I always send them away. She said, what attention I could seek, I don't know. I just wanted to be properly assessed. So I wish I had reported her to basically the NICE guidelines or whatever they do at the time, but I had no mental strength. She completely gutted my brain from the inside. So it was deeply upsetting, traumatizing. I felt really disrespected. Her lack of knowledge and everything.
And this was the GP?
This was the psychiatrist.
Oh, crumbs. Okay.
Yeah, she was the worst psychiatrist I could probably fathom. So
what did you do after this then?
I had a little break from the whole autism thing, and then I decided to save up, and I wanted a proper assessment, so I went private. So I am a relatively low earner. I have no financial assistance from any other people, like rich parents or anything like that. So it is possible, but it takes a lot of saving. So basically, I saved up £1,100, and I got a...
So that's nearly $1,500 for our American listeners.
Wow. Right. I didn't realise we had American listeners.
We've got a thriving American listener database. It's rather lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, so you saved up your £1,100, yeah?
Yeah, basically I just wanted a proper assessment, like an actual proper doctor who knew about autism. So I found one who had specific training in assessment techniques that don't let so many women, girls, slip through the net for not conforming to male stereotypes of autism. So it was great to actually be in there and finally being listened to. So I went along with all the questionnaires that she provided. So she provided a questionnaire for me to give to my mother. So my mother would fill out, did your child this, did your child that? And so I went with my school reports from 1997 when I was 5. Yes, I'm showing my age, but never mind.
I'm older than you, so I wouldn't worry too much.
Yeah, I think so. I went with all that stuff, the school reports, questionnaires, and after a 4-hour session assessment, she told me she would write up the full report. And she said, I will be making a diagnosis. And I asked her, what does that mean? She said, you are autistic. And basically that was like a watershed moment. So that was after I found out, after 24 years of being alive, that I was actually autistic, not pretending, not borderline, which didn't fit my symptoms.
Yeah.
And so I later found out that, I've heard of a lot of misdiagnosed women with BPD, or they get misdiagnosed first with BPD before having that ruled out, basically. So the thing is with the BPD, which is why it really didn't fit me, is there's a lot of things about like having no sense of identity and also seeking out kind of thrill-seeking behaviors, like maybe gambling or something, like mood swings. That was one.
I feel like we might need to do an entire episode on this, because I just kind of very, because I said, like I say, I've had friends, I have friends who've got it, but it might be definitely something to talk about in more depth. Yeah,
because I personally don't get mood swings by myself, but what happens is if something makes me sad, I'll get slightly sad, and if someone then makes fun of me while I'm sad, I'll get sadder. And then if someone cheers me up, I'll get happier. So my mood is dependent on external factors, whether I'm sensory overload or... Basically, it felt like my mood doesn't swing rapidly from pole to pole, basically. It's just relatively steady, unless someone really, really tries to take a jab out of me. But yeah, I still struggle to this day, basically, like in the workplace, noise and, routines and all that different social dynamics, and who thinks what of me, how should I do this, how should I do that, friendships, relationships, people seem to drift away a lot.
So pretty much all the standard autistic things then?
Yeah, and I also feel like as a person who is autistic and sort of outwardly female-ish, I attract people with kind of, how do I put this politely, narcissism.
Okay.
So basically, I had a few boyfriends who had the narcissism type thing. Out of 4 boyfriends, and one current one, 2 of them at least had traits of narcissism. And I even had couples therapy with one of them. And the psychologist contacted me for a one-to-one session and told me I need to be very careful because it was an abusive relationship and that person is a narcissist. So I don't go around armchair diagnosing people, but that psychologist that was doing couples therapy with me actually warned me and told me that I really should consider leaving. So
yeah.
I feel like a lot of people with that sort of I'm so great attitude always seek me out because I might be the type of person that says, you are great, well done, or something like that. We're viewed as like easy targets, but I feel like at least I know why all these things happen. And I don't really use it as an excuse, but I just try and be like as a person, nice, friendly, helpful, hardworking, all that. And that's because I would hate anyone to feel the way I felt, so like ignored, unappreciated, misunderstood, and that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
basically, yeah, it's, I don't have so much imposter syndrome. It's always there, but I don't feel like I'm pretending that I'm autistic or anything. Not that.
No, well, I remember our imposter syndrome episode.
Yeah, exactly.
And way back at the beginning, it was you, me, and Matt, wasn't it? And
yeah, and
I do remember the blowing the smoke up the arse metaphor that went slightly off the rails.
Yeah, I still just really want to help dispel those stereotypes, even just still getting people saying things like, oh, so-and-so's rude, maybe they're on the spectrum. I always try and pull people up on that or say things like, that autism does not correlate with rudeness. So you can have rude people that are, not autistic, or you can have very polite people that are autistic. You can have any sort of type of
person
people.
Who's,
people
I think rudeness is
varied.
very much contextual, and the problem is knowing somebody else's sort of the reason why they're doing something, isn't it?
Yeah,
I've been accused of being somewhat blunt in the past, and I know you have as well. That's not because we're wanting to cause upset. We genuinely just want to
Sometimes it's like I'm trying to protect people. So I remember I was accused of being blunt and aggressive when I sent a message to the canteen saying that, oh, by the way, you've got something labelled as vegan and as having milk. So this might be dangerous for people with allergies. I was told I came across way too blunt, but I didn't say anything untoward. To me, it just looked like it was factual and straight to the point. I do try and pussyfoot around the point sometimes. It's like I want to be direct, but I'm so scared of people telling me that I am too direct. This is probably one of the things that female people, women, girls experience because they're told, know your place, and a good leader. If they're a male, they're like a good leader, but if they're a female, then they might be bossy or bitchy or whatever. People have sort of different attitudes. Not everyone, of course. Many people are not sexist at all.
I have a feeling that we should also do another episode at some point talking about management and leadership styles.
Yeah.
I might try and see if I can get my boss to join us for that because I think she's a leader and manager, and she's often told me she sometimes gets those kind of things thrown at her. So that could be quite an interesting one. And I know Watt certainly has opinions on leadership and everything. So it could be. See, we're coming up with lots of ideas for future episodes. So, listener, at some point in the next 6 to 12 years, months, weeks, I don't know, we might cover that as well. No, thank you so much for sharing that, Marianne. That's really interesting to understand sort of your journey and how difficult it can be for female people to get a diagnosis.
Yeah, I got diagnosed at 24, but in 2018. No, sorry, 17. I got diagnosed in 2017.
Yeah.
So it's been 6 years. I marked my 6-year anniversary just last month.
Oh. And do you feel a bit more settled in your own identity knowing this now?
I do feel like I fit in my skin. So it's like before it felt like my skin was all wrinkly and it wouldn't fit in the innards. But now it feels like everything's all smooth and it slots together nicely.
That's just
I know that analogy is probably quite disgusting.
No. It's one that works for you, and I'm sure there'll be other people who understand it. So
yeah, it feels like I fit in my own body, I guess. But yeah.
Oh, again, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I quite want to ask Kim or Dahlia about their own experiences as well now, because it sounds like there's probably a sort of a plethora here, but I suspect there's lots of things to discuss.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. I'm gonna pivot very slightly because I've had this thing in my brain for the last 2 days, and I kind of want your thoughts on this now because having listened to everything you've just talked about, I think you might have some opinions on this. So I saw this tweet on Monday by a person called Alison Singer, and it contained an image which I think has probably been taken from Instagram or LinkedIn or something. I'm going to ask you to just hold for a second because I'm going to read it to you because I think it needs to be discussed. So, quoting here, and I'll put a link to this, by the way, in the show notes for the listeners so they can check it out themselves. So it comes from the Autism Science Foundation, and it says, "We are committed to investing in research to detect the causes of profound autism, identify avenues for prevention, and improve the lives of those with profound needs," says Alison Singer, president of the Autism Science Foundation. "People with profound autism often face a lifetime of pain and their families a lifetime of worry. These families have been ignored for too long." And it finishes off by saying that ASF is launching their second request for proposals for profound autism pilot grants. What?
Goodness,
having read that out to you, what is your immediate response to that?
Well, apart from a propeller jet with an autism pilot flying it for some reason, lovely sort of 1940s plane being piloted by an autism person, I can't, nothing shocks me anymore with this kind of stuff, but it is very silly. There's so many things, like what is profound autism? A lifetime of pain. I think they might be confusing us with something like arthritis or something. And families, a lifetime of worry. That is a bit, sort of like, oh, we're a burden or something. These families have been ignored for too long. Not the individuals, of course, though they can be continued to be ignored. It's really sad, I guess. Profound autism. And it's strange. The big question I have is, why does the president of the Autism Foundation why is that not an autistic person? Why can't we focus more on removing the barriers and helping these families by providing things like training or actually helping, not just seeking to do some eugenics or any of that stuff? It's like, I think these families do need help, but I think they're going about it in the opposite way
so it's possible.
Yeah, and when they talk about prevention, what do they mean by prevention? How can you prevent? You can prevent trauma.
Preventing autism. That's starting to sound very slightly like eugenics to me, isn't it?
That does sound like...
We've heard this kind of language before, haven't we?
Yeah, that sounds like, your fetus is autistic, would you like to abort, or that kind of thing. I agree with preventing trauma by treating the child, well. And I think these organizations, it would be good if they focused on treating the family nicely and giving them what they need. So a special school.
Right support mechanisms, kind of.
Yeah, right support mechanisms.
Shall I tell you a bit more about this? Because I had to look this organisation up because it didn't sit right with me. There were words in there, like you said, you correctly identified the one that really triggered me was the word prevention. It's like, yeah. So I looked them up. The Autism Science Foundation was created in 2009. They split off from Autism Speaks.
Of course, yeah, that classic.
Yeah, so they did it about 2009. This lady, Alison Singer, was the senior vice president of Autism Speaks, and she resigned because she didn't agree with the fact that they were still assigning a really high priority to investigating what we now know to be a completely fraudulent claim about vaccines and autism. We just want to remind people, as always, what do they not do?
They do not cause autism, no.
No, vaccines do not cause autism.
Yeah, exactly. The person who suggested that.
So, we did an entire episode about this, didn't we? So,
yeah.
Anyway, so this Alison Singer character, so she split off from Autism Speaks because she was, voted against their thing about putting research funds into vaccine and so forth. So I thought, okay, so far so good. She went away from them because of their insanity. But I thought something still doesn't sit right. So I did a bit more digging. They are a charity based in New York. And when I looked into them a bit more, they fund cure and treatment research for autism, and their goals include providing, quoting here, more effective treatments for autism. And it gets a bit darker here. They endorse applied behavioral analysis, ABA. as a leading treatment for autism. And it gets particularly bad. They look also at pivotal response training, which is a sort of a discrete version of that, which uses reward and punishment and prompts to control and modify an autistic person's behavior. For the listener, I think I'll do a quick side note here, because we're going to do a proper episode on ABA soon, aren't we?
Yeah, I believe so.
So ABA is applied behavioral analysis. It is the most popular form of treatment for autistic people in the US, and it's something many of us are fighting against here in the UK and across Europe. So it draws on a kind of a behaviorist school of psychology, and it focuses on this sort of alteration of behavior using what I'm told is termed operant conditioning. So this is the practice of rewarding desired actions, and who gets to choose those desired actions? Of course, the neurotypical people. Yes, and they punish unwanted actions. So it's a method that punish. Yeah. Oh, trust me. Yeah, we'll talk about Lavas and his book another time. I'm halfway through reading it, and holy moly, Anyway, but it kind of focuses. So their proponents claims it focuses on what they call reversible behaviours, which means it's kind of like ill-suited for autism, because that's a irreversible neurotype. It's not a reversible behaviour. ABA just forces people to mask, and often through trauma. They have a history of using like electroshock as a punishment, and some places might still do that.
Jeez.
The and I'm air quoting here, therapists will do things like they'll withhold stuff as part of a punishment. So they won't let you play with your toys. They won't let you go to playtime. I've even read cases where they'll spray water in a child's face.
Oh dear. This is why I said the term hysteria the other day, because some of these things are medieval.
Well, yeah.
Some of these treatments.
You have to remember that some of these people do not see autistic people as people. They see them as things to be pitied.
Yeah,
but, I don't want to bang on about this because we will do a full episode, but it's one thing that really upsets me a lot is, this ABA stuff forces autistic children to mask. It causes them to deliberately hide their authentic traits. So, like, one of the things I've been reading about is, it might not seem like autistic people learn eye contact, but we simply learn to tolerate it because those sort of external motivators or abuse. And also, interestingly, without kind of maintenance, autistic people will sort of, air quotes again, lose those skills that they've learned, and they'll go back to their default being of, autistic. And it's the whole idea behind this is about turning autistic people into being like neurotypical, I don't know, mimes, mimics. It encourages that masking, and it gives those incredibly poor mental health outcomes that you were talking about earlier
fatigue.
on. Yeah, absolutely.
People don't realise the fatigue.
Absolutely. And, one of the things I was really pleased to find was earlier this year, the Irish government had a sort of a cross-party committee. They found ABA was abusive, and it doesn't meet the UN conventions on rights because it breaches an autistic person's right to autonomy, to dignity, their right to identify, but crucially, their freedom from non-consensual or degrading treatment. I mean, even United States Department of Defense is now reconsidering whether or not they fund this kind of treatment because of the way in which the US DoD actually funds a lot of people's medical stuff. Turns out, if you're in America, the most socialist organization in America is the Army. That's probably an episode in itself. Well, yes, they give you money towards your where you live, and they make sure that you have medical and dental for you and your family. And
because a lot of the very right-wing people that I've met from America, they really like the military and guns and stuff. I guess maybe they don't know that. Maybe.
Well, they look after their people, which I think we're going to send you out to go and die for our country, which I suppose we should probably look after you a bit. There's a very good podcast which I've recognised, put into the notes if anyone's interested in the US who want to listen to some leftist ex-military types talk about these things. Anyway, so back to Alison Singer for a moment. So I looked into her a little bit as well because so I'm like a terrier with a bone at this stuff. So I mentioned, so we've talked about like Autism Speaks on this podcast before, and I think we can do an entire episode on them on their own, can't we?
Yeah.
So, like I said, Singer was a senior executive with them for years and years and years. And Autism Speaks did a documentary called Autism Every Day. Have you ever seen it?
No, I don't think I have heard of it, though.
Yeah, I watched it. So Singer, it turns out, does have an autistic child, a daughter. And during the course of this interview, as part of this documentary, she has her daughter, Jodie, there with her. And she says the following, and I'm going to ask you a bit of a trigger warning here for people, but she says, I had sat in the car for about 15 minutes and actually contemplated putting Jodie in the car and driving off the George Washington Bridge. It's only because of Lauren, who's her other daughter, who's neurotypical, that I have another child, that I didn't do it.
What? So basically an unhinged murderer type.
So yeah, literally. So Autism Speaks, who she worked for a long, long time, they chose to highlight a parent thinking about killing herself and her child, and only talked herself out of it because of her other neurotypical child. So I mean, the thing that really got to me was, and it'd be one thing, it would still be incredibly bad if she'd been there, distraught and emotional whilst recounting this incident, because people have those kind of feelings, right? And it's perfectly normal and acceptable to go through a period of mental health crisis where you want to end everything. That is fine.
But taking your child with you.
I mean, just for the listener, if you ever find yourself in that position, please, please, please get help. You can call the Samaritans for free in the UK, and I'll put some links for who else you can talk to elsewhere in the world. But sorry, I'm ranting now. I realise this because it's so upsetting. So I was watching this, and you'd expect someone to be upset when they talk about this, but no, she's not. She's quite sort of like light. She's smiling whilst talking about considering killing her autistic child. And Autism Speaks chose to broadcast this in a film that was ostensibly about autism advocacy. And this kind of speech is just so dangerous and when you view your child's autism as a horrific, life-ruining curse, thinking like this woman. She now runs this organisation that puts out this message about wanting to prevent autism. So the Autism Science Foundation, I think we're going to have to add them to the list to be boycotted. They are an organisation, people.
Definitely.
Let's get this off my chest. I just want your thoughts. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. That's basically an unhinged murderer type. I mean, people occasionally get suicidal thoughts and stuff, but to take your child with you is really, really bad. So the fact that they look at that and think, oh, that's good material because that shows how bad these auts are. These silly autistic people, oh, no, they need to be killed. And it's really sad that people are pushed like that. So, I mean, any country, it's a shame that you can't get like the odd nanny visit to come and help out and, things like support, medical support and mental health support, maybe therapy for the parent, therapy for the child, special adapted toys and adjustments. Because if basically the state or whoever, or charities or anyone really, looked at this kind of situation as an opportunity to help rather than prevent, it would be, I think it's a lot of an easier place to start looking at genetics and that kind of stuff. It would just be nicer to, meet the family, talk to them about their issues. What is it that your child does? Does your child scream a lot? Oh, maybe,
why? Is there something common there? So
give them some hobbies or basically a mental health professional or someone that actually knows about autism. Maybe speak to the child, or if the child is non-verbal, give them special communication toys, or I don't know. It's like any of that seems less extreme than wanting to drive your child off a bridge to kill them. Because if this person's part of that board of that big charity, they must have enough money to hire a part-time nanny.
They
must have some time to hire a nanny to help out with, looking after and also mental health.
Or, find an actual expert who can help them looking after her child in a supportive way so she can actually achieve all the amazing things that we know people can achieve in their lives.
Yeah, they can get help. It's just that, especially for this person, if they're rich enough to be the president of something or other, then it seems more logical to try and get the child help and try and get some therapy if you're getting thoughts that dark.
Yeah, absolutely. But there you go. So, like I say, that's another organisation to add to the bad list. I think we're going to have to deep dive Autism Speaks sometimes, because this is one of the nicer things that they've passed. So, yeah, holy moly, there's lots to talk about. That feels like a bit of a dark place to finish. So I have found also a friend of mine in America sent me across this note from yesterday, where basically a man from Philadelphia, which is, I don't know, somewhere in colonies, one of those places. Sorry, I can't say it like that, can I? But you know what I mean. Anyway, so a chap in Philadelphia got on. Autistic chap gets on the wrong train and ended up getting completely and utterly lost in sort of what I'm told is a bit of a mammoth network of New York City's Grand Central Station. So his family were a bit worried that they'd have to come and to go across to New York to collect him. But before they even left home, 3 New York City transit officers got the call and went looking for him. And so they found him, who was rather happy to find out that they'd found him. And they made sure that he got back onto the right train, and they took him all the way back to his home station and handed him over to his family. And
nice.
Apparently he had such a lovely time chatting to them on the train and was really grateful, because from what he said, he was completely sort of unable to coordinate where he was going, and he just got completely lost. And he telephones the officers today to say thank you to them. So, but that's the kind of thing. Actually, when people take the time, and staff or whoever, to check in if someone's okay, and then go out of their way to make sure that they're looked after.
We do remember that thing. We do remember that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any last thoughts?
Well, I did see a very unusual sort of one of those TikToks. I don't actually have TikTok, but it was a screen recording on Instagram of something. It made me have a few thoughts. I mean, it wasn't like
share us the thoughts.
It wasn't extreme. It was basically it was a person. I don't know if they related to this family in any way. A person filming the Royal Guard in London, and a boy and his father, basically. And the boy is very interested. Mm-hmm. He looks at the guard because he's wearing full uniform and a funny hat with some strings on it. And it's a really tall hat. It is very interesting. The boy looks, and the boy's very interested. He tries to get a bit closer. Mm-hmm. And the guard thinks, you know what, I'm going to make it easier for this boy. I'm going to walk closer instead.
And that's unusual because they normally stay stock still.
Yeah, so I thought, oh, that's nice. But the caption was very strange because it says, I just watch what the Royal Guard does for the boy, and the father makes sure the autistic son doesn't get too close. And everyone's crying at it. Why did this make me cry? And I'm thinking, first, if you're not related to a family, it's a bit creepy to be filming them. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely creepy to upload it to the internet. The way that he says the boy and the father instead of, my husband, my son, makes me think that it might have been a stranger. That's a bit weird. And it gets back to that sort of inspiration stuff. Like, look how inspirational we are just because we exist. And it has one of those songs on it, one of the Sia songs. It's about, shouting. Ah! All the songs are like that nowadays. I mean, but it's got this really inspirational, shouty music. This make me cry. This autistic son. It just, it made me think. I had all these questions like, what makes this inspirational? Yeah, the guard was kind, but what's this? Why is this making someone cry? The boy just is looking at that. He's having fun on holiday, just like any other normal person. And it was just really weird. These people that they look at autistic people like we're some sort of inspirational source because we exist, and they want to put it online or do it with the funny music and that kind of thing. Call it like inspiration, P word. You go on, Simon.
Do you mean porn?
Yes, it's a word that sometimes I don't really say because it's got
I'm aware. I do still remember you telling me that I had to go to beep jail.
Yeah. so it's things like, oh, this person's an angel, this special little angel, and a little miracle, so brave, so inspirational. You're different. You're not disabled. You're different, and all these things that are a little bit. It can be a bit creepy.
Just a little bit, yes.
Yeah, I would find it very creepy if someone called me inspirational because I managed to keep a job, autistic at the same time. But it's just a person that has
trying to live their life.
Needs. Yeah.
Well, let's move on from inspiration porn.
Yeah.
If you send me a link to that, I'll put it in the show notes so people can see it and judge it for themselves. But I think we've been chatting for a little while now.
Yeah.
So, but thank you so much for joining me. It's wonderful to have you back again, and I look forward to having you on more episodes again into the future.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for listening as ever. We hope to do another recording soon with Dahlia as well, who's making a return, hopefully. But until then, have a very pleasant weekend, everyone, and take care. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.
Hello, it's Simon in post-production here. I just wanted to slightly apologise for any quality issues during this recording. As you could probably tell, Marianne had dialed in using a telephone, and whilst I did my very best to remove as many artefacts as possible, one or two may well have slipped through. But thank you as ever for listening, and we're hoping we will have a improved quality next time when she has a working computer. Take care now all. Bye.
And the dish ran away with the spoon.